to go between the language of the customer and the way the customer talks about their problem and the technologists that are going to build the product. So talking to your software developers, your designers, and doing that translation between the two, which is often super hard. It's often really, really, really hard to be able to straddle those two worlds because they are so different.
Yeah, I can. Something that I really like to do as well, and I think what's really important for me, and I always try to kind of do this when I'm working in product. It's like I really like to get the people that are actually on, in there building the software, the UX team, the engineers up to that, to that customer. So like, I really like to try and bring them along the entire journey as much as possible. So try to get them involved in customer interviews, seeing the customer use the product firsthand. It's just so valuable. Like if you're sitting in a customer call yourself with an engineer, UX person, you're listening to the customer speak through their problems. They're going to say things, and each of you are going to like take away different kind of parts of that. And once you kind of go back and you unpack that together, you get like such a more complete picture of what they're actually experiencing and their pain. So I feel like, yes, you certainly do play a big role in kind of translating between these two different, I guess, personas. But like bringing the engineers along is such a valuable thing.
So true.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, line of sight to the customer is so critical, isn't it? It's really, really good. Yeah, I love it. So I want to welcome the guests that have joined us on the stream today. So I'm going to bring in our first question. Welcome to Christian from Ghana. It's great to have you join us on the call. And you've got a fabulous question, which every founder should be asking at the early stages, and that is, how do you validate your market? Especially if your market is in another country. Nathan, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, it's a very, very important thing. I think often forgotten. A lot of people like to jump in and just start building, but this is really a fundamental step before you kind of choose to go down a certain path. So we for example, did this when we started working on our solution. So for us, it was kind of like a two-pronged approach. So one factor is we need to really kind of understand the problem that we're trying to solve. So for context, so what we do at Subble is we help businesses manage their software subscriptions. So our kind of, I guess, hypothesis when we went into this was that we believe that companies are overspending on software through different things like underused licenses sitting there forgotten, people have left the company still retaining licenses. So that was our hypothesis. How we approached it was, firstly, we wanted to understand, can we find a person or a group of people that have this problem? So we went out, we started speaking to different companies. We identified, okay, we have actually found companies that have specifically had this problem. They've gone and tried to solve it manually in the past. Then what we have to do is kind of zoom out and say, okay, is there a collection? Is there a broader, can we find 100 people with this problem? So we started to do like kind of top-down research as well. So I guess it was a combination of like bottom-up and top-down.
I wanted to pause you there because I think you've said something that's really important, and that is that you're really focused on the problem space. Yeah, nothing you've said at the moment is about your solution, which I think is something that we just see all the time. That it's common that we come at the whole entrepreneurial startup space from a solution sort of mindset, and what you've described is really the perfect advice that we give, which is start off with the problem. If you can't validate that the problem exists and you can't find customers with the problem, then you're already on shaky ground. So it's absolutely fabulous to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. So like, with, I guess, my background in product, so the solution is like 5 steps down the, and with me and my team, we really just zoned in on that. Like, can we find people with this problem, and then can we find a market with this problem? And you can get a lot of really good market data just by like we found some fantastic data on this market space, but like you can't just rely on that. Like you've got to still speak to actual people and find are there actually people who have this problem.
Yeah. So that's the second thing that I'd point out about what you've said there is this is sort of a 2-step thing. It's one that's talking to customers. Mm-hmm. You need to talk to individual human beings, but then there's no point building a product for a human being with a unique problem. You've got to find a whole group of human beings that we call a market, and that's the best way to think about a market segment is basically just a group of human beings. that have got this problem, and the top-down research is going to help you with that. Terri, just to bring you in, I know that that's something that we've spent a lot of time with thinking about market segmentation. Have you got any thoughts on or tips for people that are thinking about market segmentation? Are there any activities or exercises that you can recommend to help people figure out that? Because it's not easy necessarily.
It's not easy, and I think people get a bit worried that they're not going to do the right job, but basically, it's a great creative first step. Is just this brainstorming and just mind mapping it effectively and seeing where it goes. So you start with your basic sort of traits or criteria, or like if you had to categorize and describe a certain group of people, what have they got in common? And you can start with the basics. Are they all a certain age group, or are they, living in a certain area, or they have obviously a certain problem that they need to have solved? But what is more unique about them? And the more that you can describe the commonalities in there and think really creatively, and you might come up with, 50 or 100, and then really analyze them and go, okay, well, what are the most important things that I need to find that are common, that are going to help me potentially down the track in being able to find the common solution for them. So I only have to build one product that's going to meet all of their needs. They're not going to all need something different, different feature requests, and then your marketing messaging can be quite cohesive for that group as well. So you're sort of future proofing that, but your first step is this brainstorming and then figuring out the top maybe half a dozen criteria that are common. And then when you go and talk to people and do those initial, as you're saying, Nathan, validation conversations around the problem, you start going, there's some additional traits here I hadn't even noticed before that are super, super, super important. Like all of these people have to come into the office for their job. None of them are remote. And that's a key factor that I need to design for in my solution, or their experience that I need to design for example.
Yeah, so that's a really good point.
Get really creative.
That iteration, as you say, you want to start off with, we love that that we call it the segmentation criteria mind map, don't we? Creating that out, just go, I think it's mining companies that really have got this problem in spades, or I think it's people with kids that have got this problem, or whatever you think the criteria is. And then when you actually go out and speak to customers, you either validate that signal and find that that's a good hypothesis, or it's not. And so you just got to keep iterating and have the right kind of tools, and not just rely on intuition. And I think this is one of the challenges that founders have, is founders have a bias for action. They have to. It's great. It's a really important thing. But if you don't have some sort of process, you're just going to spend a lot of time, going from one thing to another, and intuition is unlikely to get you there. So having a process behind that is just, really, really important. Awesome. Great question. Thanks, Christian. Maybe let's jump in and talk a little bit about Subble, because I think just by talking about your business, we're going to learn a ton about the process of building a company. So perhaps let me start off with a really simple question, given money's tight at the moment, and I'm sure every business is sort of thinking about that. Firstly, have you got any tips for saving on SaaS costs?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is particularly relevant at this time, right? We're seeing a lot of the companies, a lot of the people that we're speaking to are actively looking for solutions in this space. So look, there are a lot. So there's really kind of a few different problems with overspending on software. So something that you see regularly, well, it's going to all depend on company size as well. Let me just kind of preface with that. So like smaller companies have different types of problems than bigger companies. So but some of the common problems would be like overlapping or redundant software. So one thing we see a lot is a company will be running like a Miro and a Figma at the same time. You've got two solutions that are kind of doing the same thing. So the kind of problem there is it fundamentally comes from like a lack it comes from a lack of visibility mostly. So like just not knowing the software that you're running, people just don't realize that they've got multiple solutions. We sometimes even see within a single company, they've got two teams subscribed separately to the same products. So there's a lot of problems around that, just like redundancy. So in those kind of cases, it's really just about getting visibility into the software that you're running. So, there's ways you can kind of get at that information. If you're using like in your accounting software like Xero, you can kind of get to that information. It's a bit clunky, but like there's ways to kind of see all the different accounts and the different contacts that you're spending money with. There's a way to surface it there. You could also kind of surface it from your like identity provider, so how people log into things. It is a bit clunky, but essentially you want to get that definitive list of softwares. A tip that I recommend is actually you can just run that list through like ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me all the overlaps we've got in our suite. That's a really simple way to just kind of figure out, okay, is there anything here, any low-hanging fruit that we could address? You've got other problems then around like utilization and licenses. And this is probably where a lot of the kind of bigger overspending problem is. So what happens is, companies might be running a project and they'll go, okay, let's get everyone set up on Miro so we can brainstorm it out. And then the project ends. 6 months later, though, they realize, oh, we've been paying for these 10 people for the last 6 months. So that's another problem. And it's really just like auditing your software. Now, this one's, it's all very time consuming. But essentially, you just need to be logging in to your different softwares, going to the list of users, making sure that they're actually active. So you'll often get signals like last activity date from the software. Sometimes you don't. So you're going to have to do things like send out a survey or post something around. But then you're also looking for ex-employees. So very, very regularly. So there's actually a study done recently. So 80% of people report still having access to at least one piece of software from a former employee. So it's very, very common. So it's not only a cost thing, but it's a security risk, right? So like leaving them there, being able to access your data. So those are some of the kind of common problems. Now, you might have kind of inferred from that it is complicated to do this manually. Like you can do it, it's just very time consuming, very complicated. So, I guess the best recommendation would be use a tool like Subble that does all of that for you. So essentially we'll find all that information, we'll bring it all into one place, and we'll just give you the list of here's where you're overspending.
Yeah. Really, really interesting. Let's sort of move on to a slightly different question, and Terri, I'll bring you in on this one, but I'll let Nathan go first. Why did you choose this particular problem? And Terri, I'll get you to comment on why it's a good or a less good problem that a startup founder might want to focus on. But yeah, Nathan, why did you choose this particular problem? What sort of led you to deciding to start Subble and solve this problem?
So really, for us, it was. We took an interesting approach. We kind of we started out by really just there's a book from Good to Great, actually. They talk about like first who, then what, and we kind of really followed that philosophy. So we identified as myself, my other two co-founders, that we really want to kind of do something together. So we all agreed like let's make this thing happen. And then the first thing we did was we sat down we booked out a share space meeting room. We sat down, got around the table, and we're like, okay, now what? What do we do? So, we had a few different ideas, but really like this one actually particularly, we all kind of resonated with this to some extent. And being in a few different companies, particularly going through like kind of the acquisition that we went through, like we saw firsthand just how like messy this can be in a business, how messy software can be, and that's kind of was really the like I guess the thing that got us thinking about this was just thinking about being in the trenches, seeing this in a larger company. The other thing that really I guess got me particularly passionate about this problem, well, kind of like maybe even angry about this problem, was like, a few years ago, like, and even today, you're seeing so many of these companies going through these like mass layoffs and all that kind of stuff. And, having kind of seen this wastage in software, and I just got thinking about like, there is just money sitting there being wasted in these businesses, but they're going and choosing to like remove employees to save money. And that was really frustrating, like just seeing this happen. Like a lot of close friends of mine, my family members as well, seeing people get made redundant. So it was kind of a confluence of things, and that really just got us kind of really interested in this problem, but then we took a very I guess calculated approach. Like we thought this was a problem that we were all very passionate about, but we didn't really want to commit to this until we'd actually validated that there was an actual market there, that this problem was pervasive enough, urgent enough. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started. We all had some I guess close experience with this problem, but then we really just went in and validated that it was actually something that people experienced.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's always a good place to start is something that you're passionate about, right? And I also really like the first who, then what. It's getting the right people together with the right kind of mindset, and you kind of alluded to this before as in the product management space, is there are different needs at different stages of the company. And when you're at that founding stage, you need that passion, you need the willingness to invest and get a delayed return on investment, like give up that salary that you're going to take. And so having the right kind of mindset is really critical, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But, Terri, from your point of view, have you got any thoughts on why this problem is particularly an interesting and a good problem for a startup to solve?
Yeah, well, as you say, that you're quite keen on the problem, like you're passionate about the problem. So when you're going to talk to what I would see is when you're talking to users or potential users in that market to validate there's a problem, like you're able to extract the information. Like you can ask a point blank question, like, do you have this problem? But then being able to get the nuance out of them as well. And that's so important, I think, is to really get that nuance of understanding the context that problem lives in. Like that is like the next most important thing, is understanding, how does it happen? When does it happen? What are you doing when it happens, type thing. And when you're particularly interested in that problem, or you want to solve that problem or relieve that pain that it's causing, then I think that's a really great place to start, because it's going to drive you forward. It's going to make you hang in there through the knockbacks and the tough times, because you're still passionate about it, and you'll find a way if there truly is a market there that needs it to be solved. I'd say that's one of the key elements. And then I'd say the second key element is once you start being able to identify without bias that it's truly an important problem that the user wants solved. And we say important, we say it's a high priority for them. They're losing sleep at night. We call it pants on fire problem. So is it up there is one of the top ranking things that they're worried about that could have substantial impact if it was solved? Is it happening frequently enough? Are they actually already paying money today, and they're either wasting that money, or there's a much, much better way it could be solved? So they're the sort of key indicators of a really, promising problem to go after.
100%. And I like Professor Scott Galloway from NYU sort of did a bit of analysis on startups, and he noticed that a lot of the top startups are effectively what he called a time machine, which is they're giving time back to people. And I think you said it there with, the problem that you're trying to solve. It's one of those painful things. It's like, I know I really should do that, but I feel like I've got a million more important things to do, like going out and speaking to customers. I don't want to be, accounting through my software licenses. And so if there's a product that can help me with that seems like it's a great time saver, which is what's, a lot of people need. So
I love that expression, the time machine.
It's great, isn't it? Christian had a follow-on question here. I'll just bring his question back in. Is does the founder always need to have experienced the problem? It's a really good question. Terri, do you have a perspective on that?
I would say not necessarily. Like, what's interesting is it might start as an initial thing that they're familiar with, but what they end up solving might be something different once they've gone down that, those user research, that market research. They actually may uncover a completely different problem that is even better to solve, and they've recognised that and they've gone after it. So that's my thought. That's my thought. But I'd be interested to see what you guys think.
Yeah,
that's happened to us recently with a few clients that have come on board that have said, like, I'm super experienced at this problem. I'm passionate about this problem, and we go out and then we do the market research and we find that customers are just not that interested and not ready. Maybe the market's not quite mature enough. And then the founder has to pivot. And you can feel a little bit lost as a founder if you felt like, your original idea, you've got all this experience and you're really well set up. And now suddenly you're solving a problem that you know nothing about, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. There's so many stories. Airbnb, being a classic one. The founders weren't expert in that space at all. You need to eventually become an expert. I think that's the thing. And it's through the customer discovery and the user research and the market research process that you will become an expert, and you're more likely to know more than anybody else about your problem. Have you got any thoughts on that, Nathan?
Yeah, definitely. So, you need to become an expert, definitely, but you don't need to have deep experience. So, like, take my last role, for example. I was, the head of product for a prop tech company. I've never been involved in real estate, but now I know far too much about real estate than I should. But you become an expert. You speak to your market. You really get entrenched in there. Like, one thing I'd actually speak to is there is a potential risk that comes along with being having experience with the problem that you're trying to solve, in that you can sometimes look at you and consider you the customer or the market. And you can kind of get blinders on. You can be like, oh, but I'd like this, I'd like this, I'd like this. And you kind of forget that you actually need to take the aggregate of everyone else's, opinion, and you start to kind of overweight your own perspective and your opinion. So that's something I just caution. If you are an expert, don't let that shouldn't stop you from being as active, as proactive, getting out and hearing other people's opinion. And I think that's kind of a secret advantage you have if you're not an expert in that space. By default, you just have to speak to people. So, yeah.
You make such a good point there, and we see this failure mode all the time where founders think they know what customers need, and often they're right. They do know what customers need, but the problem is that customers are often so much less mature in their thinking about the problem than the founder is, and the founder needs to take the customer on that journey. And so customers buy what they want, not what they need. And so there's a classic mistake that founders make. And so, spending more time with customers to really understand what they're going to pay for, and figure out your marketing and sales is so important. You make a really, really good point there. Let's bring in another question. We've got Joel join us on YouTube. And Joel's asking, what are some of the tips for determining pricing on your product? Have you got any experience in that, Nathan?
Yeah. So this is a hard topic, right? There are some, I guess, more scientific approaches. So there's a thing called like the Van Westendorp Price Sensitivity Index. So you can do certain exercises to kind of figure out where things like could be priced. But pricing it's kind of more of an art than a science, I feel. And just to take our approach, for example, we're really just going out and experimenting. Like, everything's an experiment, and so it's pricing is the same. Like, you should be experimenting with pricing models. You should be experimenting with price point. And that's kind of how we're approaching this. We're going out, we're putting out different ideas. We're trying kind of different, I guess, models in different markets. We're trying completely different models as well as different price points. So it's hard to figure this out. And I think the best way to approach it is just to kind of experiment and kind of play around until you find that right spot. Obviously, use any kind of tools, any kind of pricing, I guess, research or studies that you can conduct. But for us, it's mostly been experimentation.
Yeah, it was a great point. And I see this happen too often where founders land on a price and then they think they're done. And particularly if you've got investors, you start to get pressure to scale, and just go with the price that you've got instead of, what you're suggesting, which, we absolutely advocate for, which is more experimentation. We had one founder a few years ago that they had a price on their product that they didn't publish on the website. You had to go through a sales call to learn the price, and every call they increased the price by $1. And they just kept going until they figured out what customers were willing to pay. It was a really, really interesting experiment. But Terri, what's the advice that you're normally giving to founders on pricing?
Yeah, well, I guess initially, if you take it right back to the early phases, is what are your customers already paying to solve this problem? So if you can include that in your research, in your discovery research, to really understand in the context of their situation, what are they actually paying for? What solutions are they using today? So you get an idea of what they're prepared to pay already. So that's a really good starting point. So I would always take that initially. And then obviously you need to then, as your thoughts mature and your solution starts, crystallizing, etc., is understanding obviously all the economics involved, like, how much does it cost to market and sell? Obviously, how much does it cost to deliver and operate? So then you need to make sure that you want to build a sustainable business model at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a really interesting point. I could actually even speak to that a little bit. So in our product, for example, so we know that we are like a cost reduction tool. So we've taken some of these data points into kind of formulating our initial pricing. So what we did is, once we kind of had enough data on what the scale of the problem, how much companies were typically overspending, we kind of had an idea of where we could kind of price our product. So we used that to inform our initial price point. But once we started collecting more data, so we started to learn, okay, we now know how much they're overspending and how much we could save them. We're starting to learn actually how much time they're investing in the problem too. So we're starting to take these additional inputs and start to quantify, like, what does that actually cost the company? If they're using other products, what is that costing? So yeah, we've definitely take all those inputs, start to kind of quantify what they're spending today, and then use that to definitely inform your price.
That's great.
Yeah,
that
really
really
maps. There's no black and white method.
Yeah.
Is there? Yeah, exactly.
That really maps to the advice that we give, which is, when you're first, when you got your first customers, you have to guess, because you don't know, and your customers often don't know the value of your software either. And it's really important to have value-based pricing too. That's probably, one of the most important underpinning things. But the first thing is only take feedback from paying customers. There's no point giving out free trials to begin with, because people only value what they pay for. But it has to be a bit of a guess. And then as you start to serve customers, you will be able to spend time looking at the data. And you'll even find some customers that are willing to open their books and share with you, because they've got a board, or they've got bosses, or they've got somebody that they want to say, hey, this project that we did with Subble, for example, we thought we were going to save this, but we ended up saving that. And people actually want to know the data. And it's really worth going back and doing those projects with a customer to really figure out what your value is. Probably the last point I'd say is that a good rule of thumb that I hear all the time that seems to work is about a 1 to 10 kind of ratio kind of works from pricing. So if you're saving, somebody $10, they're sort of willing to pay a recurring $1 fee to get that $10. So that's a useful rule of thumb to get you started. But yeah, experimentation, going back to what you said earlier, Nathan, is absolutely the key.
But I like your point. Like, the fact is, your first price is a guess, and don't be afraid to just pick one and then kind of move from there. Yeah,
totally, 100%. So let's sort of swing back to Subble a bit and talk about the space that you're in, because I think it's really interesting for even for founders. Probably not your ideal customer, early stage founders. You're working with a bit bigger businesses, but I know as founders we struggle to contain our costs. So what are some of the solutions that you can put in place to better monitor your subscription spending?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, there's certainly things that you could be doing from day one as founders to kind of put yourself in a good position here. So yeah, and for Subble, for example, our ideal customer, we're really looking at kind of that slightly larger company, maybe 30 to 50 as a kind of minimum, up to anything like 200 kind of is our current market. But there are still things you can be doing. So one thing we recommend is It comes to how you're like doing your accounting from the start. So one thing that we see a lot of kind of more mature companies are doing, they're breaking their costs down at a bit more granularly. So take, for example, your subscription. So like if you set up Xero, for example, you'll get a default bucket account called subscriptions. So you could start piling everything in there. But what we'd actually recommend you do is segment that out a little bit, set it up by team. So you could have engineering subscriptions, marketing subscriptions, that kind of thing like that. And that'll actually set you up. So when you kind of start to scale, you've got much better visibility into kind of where your costs are going.
Yeah, great advice.
Other suggestions are things like virtual cards are a fantastic solution these days. So getting yourself set up on virtual cards, like a really good solution is you can set up one virtual card per software vendor. And if you're using something like AirWallet, for example, you get like 100 virtual cards in that subscription. So
you're talking about virtual credit cards, just to be clear.
Sorry, I am virtual credit cards. So yes, and that way you've got like really nice breakdown of your spend per vendor. You can set like caps and all sorts of things on those. You can do some budgeting from that. So I'd be looking just at getting good visibility from the start. And that visibility will really help you in the long run when you want to know, okay, where are we actually overspending? The problem that we see is people, they realize they've got a problem, but they just have such bad data to work with. They can't find where the problem is.
Yeah, great advice. I wanted to come back just to talk about your ideal customer, because we're focused on helping founders here, obviously, but I think one of the insights for founders is you've said that your ideal customer is sort of that 50 to sort of user, and that's because your average transaction size for a sale is going to be significant enough, so you're not having to sell ones and twos. Mm-hmm. And this is a thing that we see all the time with founders, where a product like yours could really easily help a startup with 1 or 2 employees, but in terms of your first beachhead market, it's probably not a good selection for you to be spending all of your sales time just making ones and twos. You want to be making a couple of dozen user sales at once, and then you'll come back to the ones and twos later once you've scaled. So I think that's a really, really, really important takeaway from the approach that you're taking.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's certainly worth we can talk on a little bit. So like what I think, finding your the sweet spot is really difficult, because you want to be getting the most bang for buck from every kind of sale you get, every customer you get. But there is a tipping point where, let's say we start to sell to like 500 size or 1,000 size companies, right? There's fantastic revenue from those kind of sales, but they'll come along with much greater complexity. So the sale itself,
right?
The sale itself will be more complicated, a longer sales cycle, but also they're going to come along with all these requirements. They're going to need very specific things that you need to do. So what you'll start to do, you'll start to end up making a very bespoke custom solution for this person. Then you go to make your next sale and you realize, well, I have to do that all over again for this person. So you've got to really think about that. Like, where is the sweet spot in that we can get really good return for our investment, but we are able to still take a kind of standard homogeneous product to that market. So that's where we really played around with. So like some of the things that we considered were, like, once you start to sign like enterprise contracts, for example, this type of product, the problem space changes. So if you kind of shift up to that maybe 500 person company, all of their contracts with their vendors are enterprise. They're like 3-year locked in contracts. Our software is not really adding the same kind of value to those companies. So that's how we really thought about our market. Like, where can we get good value? Where is the company big enough, but they're still not in that space, but all their contracts are locked in enterprise? So it does take a bit of time. It takes a lot of, speaking to different customers, but that's like the advice I would give, is try to find the highest part of that market where it doesn't kind of change the fundamental offering you have.
Yeah, it's great. As a founder that's selecting a beachhead, you're trying to make your job as easy as possible to start with. You can get to the more difficult, more challenging clients later, whether that's more challenging from a cost of customer acquisition, or whether it's a more challenging feature set you need to build. But Terri, to bring you back in, the thing that you mentioned earlier, the mind mapping exercise for market segmentation criteria, is exactly the tool that would help you with this, isn't it? To allow you to figure out what's a good customer versus a less good customer to start with.
Yeah, exactly. So you would have all those potential possibilities that Nathan just mentioned on your mind map, on your criteria mind map, to go, okay, well, I could potentially target businesses of this size, or the next size up, or that next echelon up, and they're all up for consideration. But then when you start to look into the pros and cons and the trade-offs, and what does that mean, as you say, for complexity of your product or selling, and just even operating and delivering, especially during your first go, your first target market, when you're trying to build your product or build your offering. You want to keep that as least complicated as possible within the realm of what you're trying to solve, because that's always going to reduce your risk of failing at the end of the day. It's going to sustain your runway, your financial runway as well. All that complexity comes at an actual capital cost as well for your startup.
Totally. And so those sort of tools like the mind map is things that you've got to operationalize. It's not just a one-time thing that you can do and then it's one and done. You've got to keep coming back and back and back, because you're learning from customers all the time. Yeah. Exactly. All right, let's shift gears to, I think this is the question that I've been sort of dying to ask you, Nathan, which is, who are the worst offenders? Who are the worst offending subscriptions that cause the most pain for companies?
Yeah, so there are certainly some kind of notorious offenders on this list. So some of the, I guess, category-wise, probably by category, the worst by far is project management software. So there was actually some research done on project management specifically, and even individual project managers typically run 3 or 4 different project management softwares. So it's like the company is, the person is running multiple. Like you can imagine the problem in the company. So your project management stuff, like your like Trello's and Asanas and Monday.coms, those kind of things is what I'm talking about. But then you've got your I guess design whiteboard. The whiteboarding software just kind of got post-COVID. Every company needed to desperately reach for some whiteboarding software. So that we saw a massive uptick in adoption around those pieces of software, and then a subsequent massive uptick in abandoning those software but still paying for them. So we find a lot of people have these Miros and these Figmas and stuff just lingering in the background, not being used but being paid for. So some of those ones are kind of the big ones, the Mondays, the Asanas, but then you've got your Jiras, which is another big common one. So that's an engineering software. It's kind of a bit of an everything, a Jira. It is a task management software, but people also use it as a bit of a repository for information. So it's a common problem because, you'll go, someone needs to know something about something that was developed. So you add them as a Jira license so they can learn, they can read the thing, and then they'll just never use it again. So that's one that you see a lot of turnover. So it's really I guess, if you kind of think about it, it's situational tools. So it's often either project-based or I just need to learn something. So if you've got those kind of tools, those will regularly be the ones that will just have all these a big amount of orphan licenses. So that is a license that you're paying for that's just not being actively used. So your Miros, your Asanas, your Jiras, your Monday.coms, those are some of the ones. If you've got those in your stack, definitely log in and have a look at the licenses that you're paying for, and just remove all of the unused ones.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Let's move to another question, which is actually for you about Subble, Nathan, and that is how are you dealing with enterprise subscription licenses complexity? Is that something you're tackling at the moment, or is that a later feature for you?
So right now, so Office 365 as a specific example. So I guess for us, there's 2 types of pieces of software. There's software that helps us with discovery. And so what discovery means is the first thing we want to do when we come into a company, when you install our software, is find all the apps that you're using. So then the second thing we'll do is the optimization. So we actually use Microsoft as one of those discovery tools. So really there's two kind of key inputs to the discovery. There's your accounting software, and then there's your identity provider, which is like a Microsoft or a Google. So for that particular example, we have a really robust integration with, and we do those ones actually as well. We find a lot of unused licenses in the Microsofts and the Googles, and those are actually really expensive to have a license on those. So we work with those really nicely, but when I was kind of talking more about like enterprise licenses and subscriptions, it would be more like with your point products. So like if you have an enterprise subscription to Monday.com, for example, that's where things just get a bit fuzzier, because those just become very custom. Like the requirements or the agreement could be anything. Like sometimes you just have to pay a fixed price no matter what your utilization looks like. So once we kind of get into that world, we don't really focus on that. But your enterprise things like your Google and your Microsoft, we integrate with really nicely. So not sure if that totally answered the question, but it's really if you're assessing whether or not this is relevant in your company, it's whether you've got, for your individual point products, if you've got a lot of lock-in contracts, a lot of enterprise agreements, that's where Subtle's not going to add as much value. It'll certainly still be valuable in finding all the software, and you will still have a lot of software that's not on enterprise agreements, so it'll add value there. But if you're starting to get up to the majority of your software being contracted, it's just going to be a little bit less valuable for you there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? And I'm sure you'll answer this question very differently in 12 months' time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, maybe I can just speak to that briefly. So, like, I think this is a really important thing for founders. It's don't try to do everything at once. So we've taken a very deliberate approach at, we're going to do this one thing, which is license optimization, and we're going to do it really well. Once we feel that we've essentially, like, there's not like one global product market fit. You don't just have this one point, okay, now our product has product market fit. We kind of think of it like you've got problems, individual like slices of the broader problem space. And we want to get to like a product market fit with that particular slice. So we feel that we can go into a company, we can solve this problem perfectly. It's seamless to use. We're giving them the right information. They can action it, everything they need. Then we'll go and look at the next adjacent slice. And eventually we'll build an entire product. So I think it's really important to just stay very, very focused. You want to do one thing like amazing. You want to be great at one thing, not just like okay at a lot of things.
That's such an important point on product market fit, and we often don't get to talk about this because we're often talking about some of the more basic aspects of product market fit. But as you say, product market fit is it's not actually a destination; it's a journey. Once you've got product market fit, you've got to keep it. And as you're evolving your target market, which you should be over time, you want to have follow-on market segments that you're chasing. You've got to continue to reach product market fit in those segments. So the whole topic of product market fit is, I think, one that deserves a lot more focus than it gets. I mean, I was at an event this week, and I'm constantly surprised that product market fit doesn't come up as a topic of conversation in the startup world.
Yeah,
it's so fundamentally important.
It is, and I think like it's a really hard thing, but you've just got to learn. You've got to stay laser focused, and you've got to say no a lot. Like there might be a very tempting, potential customer opportunity, but you've just if it doesn't fit within that very specific problem space that you're trying to solve for, you've just got to say no, or it's going to hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Terri, any thoughts for you on? I know it's a favorite topic of yours is product market fit.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I'm so glad Nathan just said all of that, because I would just repeat that again. It is so important to not think that you've reached it and that's it. You can just relax type thing. You've got to forever be on your toes, I guess. And then, as you say, looking at the adjacent market, or what is the next component of the product that you want to go and delve into, and get that one so that your users love it and be laser focused on that. And it does mean, as you say, you have to say no or not yet.
Not yet.
That's on our backlog. We'll get to that at some point in time. And so if you look at all your unicorns now, you look at their portfolio that they've now built up over time. At some point, they started with one product with one market. And then they evolved, they got the next bit to product market fit, and then the next bit to product market fit. So it's evident in those really great examples as well. And you just have to be disciplined. It can be so exciting. So exciting to go and say, oh my God, there's another shiny thing over here. But as you say, it does hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, I love the not yet comment. It's not no, it is not yet. And like take for example where we're at. Like we have a list of customers that we're actively working with, going through the kind of process of getting them onto the product. We also have a list of customers that we have addressed that we're not focusing on that market segment for whatever reason. Maybe it's technically, or maybe it's geographical or some other reason. And they're still there. Like they're still customers that we can go and reach out to. And we have been popping people off that list. Okay, now we've got this integration that actually solves that problem. We go reach out to that customer. Now we bring them onto the product. So they're not no's, they are just not yet. And you just got to be, I guess, really organized in you've got to. You don't want to lose these customers, so you need to have like tools. You need to have keep track of everyone you've spoken to. You need to kind of keep engaging with them over time, keep learning from them. But yeah, it is definitely a not yet.
Yeah, totally. All right, I think we got time probably for one more question, and I wanted to sort of riff a little bit on the what should you charge, with asking how long should you charge for like subscription links. So if you're a startup founder, like what's the ideal subscription length? Because the part of the challenge here is ideally if you're a Microsoft or you're a Salesforce, might be signing 3-year agreements. That'd be nice to have guaranteed revenue for 3 years. I might start off with you, Terri. What are your thoughts? What advice are you giving to founders about their subscription lengths?
Yeah, so I guess taking again cues from what are they currently, what situation is the user currently in and what are they used to. I think it really obviously depends on the problem that you're solving. Like, is there a one size fits all advice? I'm not sure there is. You'd have to look at each startup's unique, problem that they're solving, and then the market that they're going for, and then the product type as well. So I think that there isn't like a one blanket cookie cutter answer, I would say, for you have to have a 12-month subscription sort of model for your business model.
So experiment is what I think you're saying there.
That's right. And so I'd be interested to also hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah,
I got a thought, and it's just a thought. I don't know if it's good or bad advice, but I kind of almost feel that for an early stage company, like lock-in contracts could be a bit of a trap, because you need really your signals, your feedback loops need to be really real time. And if you've got people locked into 12 months contracts, you might think, oh, everything's fine, we've got no churn. All of a sudden you start losing customers left, right, and center. It's like, I think like, even though it's safe to have that money in the bank, like having that monthly subscription keeps you laser focused on delivering constant value, not forgetting, not saying, oh, they're fine, but they're paying us now. Like, you're constantly like, okay, I have to keep giving value. You have to keep making sure the product works and solving their problems. So like, I'd almost say, and like, we're actually taking this approach, we're not locking people in for contracts yet. Like, even though it's riskier and it's scarier, just have people on monthly contracts. You have to ensure that you're making a valuable product, or they'll leave.
So important, and this is the number one piece of advice I give to founders is, you said it, you've got to force yourself to know whether you're providing value, and if customers are not having to actively make the decision to resubscribe, you're not getting any data. And so in the early stage of your startup journey, you need to optimize your company to grow for learning, not grow for growth.
Yeah.
So this mindset around, well, let's sign 1-year contracts or maybe even longer is totally a growth mindset, which is great, and you'll get to that. But in the early stage, it's actually going to cost you more money, because now you've got to wait 12 months before you know whether a customer is going to re-sign. That's actually really inefficient. So yeah, great to hear you advocating for that as well, Nathan, because we see this as a really common issue, particularly when investors get involved and people that come from mature established business. Because this is not even a question you'd even think about. It's just like, well, of course we want to sign people up for the longest possible contract term we possibly can, but that's not going to help you learn. So, Awesome. Well, I think we're just about coming up to the end of the time. So, Nathan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. You've got a huge amount of insights. I wish we could chat for a lot longer. It's been fabulous to hear what you're doing at Subble. I think it's a great problem. It's a growing problem. It's always what you want as a founder, right? Is to be working in a problem space that's getting worse over time. So it becomes more in demand. Terri, thanks so much for your insights. It's great to have you on the show, and I know you're working with founders every day, and you're our product manager, so you're putting all of these things into practice here at Leapsheep. So it's great to have your thoughts and insights. Thanks, Terri. So in terms of getting access to Subble, Nathan, tell us. You can visit www.subble.com, or they can connect with you at LinkedIn, Nathan Mackinnon. Any other tips to offer potential people that want to get in contact with you or work with you?
Yeah, so definitely, just reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. We can just have a chat. More than happy to, just explore whether we think it's a good fit. Happy to just run through the product. So yeah, just get in touch, have a chat. I'll make sure that we're, as you've heard, if it's not the right fit, we won't force you into it. But I'd love to just have a chat with you about it anyway.
Yeah, it's great. I think you come across as the founder of the right kind of mindset, where you're not trying to sell. Like, every conversation doesn't have to result in a sale. You're more interested in learning whether you've got the right problem and the customers are the right kind of customers. So just have a conversation is a really good way to put it. So just to finish off with a quick advertisement for Leapsheep. If there's any founders out there that would like a personalized plan to help them get to product market fit, if you want to speak to one of our expert startup building advisors to explore your specific situation so that you can develop the right goals, strategy, and actions, because this is where we see the most waste of capital, is goals that are good but not great, strategies that are good but not great, or maybe just not the right fit for the type of company you're building. And again, the right actions that are going to use your capital really effectively, because the more effectively you can use your capital, the more iterations you can do. The more iterations you do, the more likely you are to be successful. So you can go to www.leapsheep.com and request a startup builder strategy session, or you can click on the QR code. It's a 45-minute session. It's free, and you'll come away with a fabulous plan for your startup. So thanks once again to Nathan and to Terri, and we'll see you next time on the show.
See you later. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.